pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the board did meet in closed session this evening, and just before we give the announcements, for the record on item D, I recused myself from closed session for that item, and trustee Scott took it from there and took the lead on that one with the board. But let's hear the rest of the report out, please.
Okay, for closed session announcement with respect to every item of business to be discussed in closed session pursuant to Government Code 54957 and 54957.6. Conference with Labor Negotiator Chris Koska, Deputy Superintendent, Human Resources and Strategic Development, Employees Organization, Nevada Federation of Teachers, also known as NFT. And then with every item of business to be discussed in closed session pursuant to Government Code 54957 and 54957.6. Conference with Labor Negotiator Chris Koska, Superintendent, Human Resources and Strategic Development, Employees Organization, California School Employees Association, also known as CSEA. And then with respect to every item of business to be discussed in closed session pursuant to Government Code 54954.5B, conference with Real Property Negotiators, Property Parcel 1B C Street, Agency Negotiator Yancey Hawkins, Negotiating Parties, North Bay Children's Center, under negotiations, price and terms, direction given.
Great, thank you. Approval of the agenda. There's no change to the current agenda. It stands as is, so I just need a motion to accept it. Okay. Trustee Mack is a first. Trustee Aguila is a second to approve the agenda for this evening. All in favor? 7-0. Okay. Public comment for consent items or any item not on, or items on the agenda and not on the agenda. Please fill out a blue card. I already have one here. And bring it up to Sally, and the blue cards are on the cart right over there. And you're allotted 3 minutes to speak before the board. And I will put you in where necessary, where you're able to speak. I don't have anything for consent. There is a change on your table. These are the Indigo contracts. So what was presented with our packet were multi-year contracts, and the board cover sheet strictly was stating to approve a 1-year contract. So now you're looking at 1-year contracts here. So we'll be approved. Okay. So with that addition or addendum,
I'll move to accept the consent agenda item as amended.
okay. First by trustee Nell, a second by trustee Cooper. All in favor? 7-0. All right, we have our student presentation. We have an alumnus here at NUSD, and I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Hogebo.
Good evening, Board of Trustees and guests and everybody. Nice to have you all here. Really happy that Rudy Perez has joined us this evening. So he went to San Jose Middle School and went to Nevada High School for a while. He was the winner of last year's high school poetry contest, and he's going to read his poem for you tonight. And I know he's a little bit nervous. Do you want to come up here? And but we're really happy to have him. The poetry contest is done blind, so they don't know who wrote it. They don't know where the person is. And Rudy happened to be in the county juvenile hall at the time. But he wrote a great poem called We the Same Color, and so he won $200 for his winning entry. And we saw this in the paper, and Leslie reached out, and we're really, really happy to have you here. So maybe you can tell us, I don't know if you want to read the poem and then tell us a little bit about it or vice versa, but we'd love to hear from you. And thanks a lot for being here.
Of course. Thank
Thank you.
you. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
It's funny. I wrote this poem for a free phone call while I was in the halls. And, you know, I didn't expect it to make it this far. This is the third time I had to speak into it in front of a board or in front of, you know, some important people. And, like, you know, get the butterflies in the stomach and everything. But this is my poem, We the Same Color. I'm black, and you black too. Not in skin tone, but deep in your roots. You think you believe you're better than me, but really I'm better than you. I realize we're all equal, all men, women, and children too. You could be white, so I'm white too. You bleed the same color as I do. Skin tone is nothing, and that's what got me bugging. You see me and you're quick to tuck your luggage. I'm brown and you're brown too. We got the same frown on a bad day too. You want to fight me, but I don't want to fight you. 'Cause if you lose, I know what you're gonna do. Come back with more, call the men in blue, and they see color, just like you do too. I'm black, and you black too. You white, me too. You're brown with a frown, I'm brown with a frown too. Now we're in the backwards. Can we get along, me and you? Thank you.
Yeah. I like it.
I mean, shoot. Well, it says it itself. I basically wrote it as if me and you are in the backwoods, you know? You don't really like me because of my skin tone or something, you know? I don't really like you because of your skin tone or something. But we're in the backwoods. What are we going to do? We're going to get along, or are we going to just let our skin be the border of safety? And that's basically the roots of this poem. The cross. I don't want racism to be there anymore, be in this county, be anywhere, be it Texas, Washington, anywhere. At first, I didn't really care about this poem. I just thought, okay, I won the poem, it's whatever. Now that I make it this far, I want this poem to reach out there, you know? I wanted to get it somewhere. Not just this poem. I have something else coming eventually, but I want this to keep on going. Continue this thing. You know? Thank you very much.
Good job.
So Rudy has his GED, and he's working over in San Francisco now in a restaurant, right? There you are. So he's doing well. Carol Mills with Mike McGuire's office is here, and she wants to present a resolution.
First of all, I too read this in the paper and was so incredibly moved that I emailed the author of the article and said, how can we, and shared it with Senator McGuire, and he felt the same way. And I said, can we send him a letter? And they said, well, you can come and read a letter to Rudy, and at this special meeting, I thought, well, if I'm coming, I'm not bringing a letter. I'm bringing a certificate of recognition from the California State Senate, because this poem just jumped off the page. And it's not surprising that you won. So this is Senator McGuire's certificate of recognition to you. Congratulations on your incredibly powerful poem, We the Same Color, and winning last year's high school poetry contest. To be able to write in a voice that is distinctly your own is a talent that few of us possess. To be able to write in a voice that both moves people and reaches their souls is a gift that cannot be ignored. Even though We the Same Color was the result of simply trying to earn telephone privileges, you have uncovered a talent and a gift that needs to be nurtured and developed. We'll all be waiting to see what your next inspiration takes you. Senator Mike McGuire. Oh, yeah.
Sneak in.
Yeah,
I'll stand
please.
behind you guys.
We're not hiding your shirt, are we?
Wait right there, you guys, for just a second. She's gonna grab a photo too.
Yeah.
Friends and family photos.
Yeah, that's important.
All right.
Great job.
Thanks, Carol.
Woo!
Yeah, I want to see you next one.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
All right, that's a way to start our board meeting. That was great. We have announcements from the board. Trustee Miller, any announcements?
No announcements this evening.
Okay, Trustee Nell? Trustee Aguila?
No announcements.
Nothing from Trustee Aguila? Oh my gosh. Trustee Mack?
And here I go, slowing
All right.
it down. It was really quick, though. I just went to the Loma Verde Open House and really enjoyed seeing a lot of people I've seen over the years, because it's my neighborhood school, but also starting to think how on the neighborhood school vein, maybe it makes sense for our elementaries to put out there to their communities that they're having an open house and bring in the retirees for potential volunteer assignments and or just supporting their local school. I think it's really important that not just the families with kids at the school
Yeah.
know what's going on there, because it is my neighborhood resource, and it takes care of my property value. So let's, I don't know, see if we can do that. Thank you.
Trustee Cooper?
Great idea. I attended the Olive back to school night and very well attended, and I stayed the entire time. It was great. Every single class. It was fun.
Oh, good. Thanks. Trustee Scott?
I attended the fundraiser for San Marin for the lights. It was very well attended, and I enjoyed myself, and it was a fun evening.
Great. One thing I did, this is like a long time ago, but the day after school started, I went over to New Beginnings because Fans was hosting their professional development. So I went by there because I felt like, and I was able to just thank them because I felt that the board doesn't never have an opportunity to thank our lunch ladies and men. To say, you know, the board really appreciates the work that you guys do, and it was because they're unable to attend our opening day rally because it's not a work day for them. So they don't start work yet. So that's why I'm like, well, weren't you guys able to come to that? So we don't get to see them hardly ever, the people who serve their kids. So I was glad to be able to get over there and just say thank you from the board. So I just wanted to let you guys know that.
Have we reported out on the trustees' dinner? Did we?
No, and I think you attended, I attended. This is Marin County School Board
Sorry, I
trustee
forgot.
dinner. Yeah,
Yeah.
several of us attended, yeah. So,
It was a good event.
Superintendent Hogaboom?
Thank you. So school has gotten off to a good start. I was just talking with Aaron about, well, how long have we been in school? And so it seems like it's been a while now, but things are running well. The schedules are going. We worked out, I think, most of the kinks right now, which is good. We had most of our back to school nights last week, as you guys just mentioned. This Thursday is San Marin. Next Thursday is Novato High School. San Jose was actually tonight. And we also have a book author in the district today and tomorrow, and her name is Alexandra Diaz, and she wrote The Only Path. Is that the name of it? The Only Road. Thank you. And it's about immigrants who have come on a journey of 2,500 miles, I think, from Guatemala. And she lives in New Mexico. And so she wrote about that, and she's been speaking to all of our schools. She actually has a sequel to the book called Crossroads, I think, that just came out today. So whenever you have an author, I think, able to come and talk to our kids, that's totally awesome, because that's the power of words, as Rudy showed us before with poetry. So I think Elizabeth had a lot to do with organizing that. So she's been speaking to all of our fifth grade classes because they're the ones who were reading that book. So she was here today, and she'll be here tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Non-agenda public comment. I do have two speakers, Aaron Fix and then Ron Frazier.
Hi. I'm Aaron Fix, Novato Federation of Teachers. I want to speak to you about our upcoming negotiations this week. And I sort of wanted to remind the board that this is not the beginning of a new year of negotiations. This is the first meeting of a failed negotiation from last year. And so I think that's an important perspective to keep in mind. That we went from being 3 years out of contract 5 years ago to being not only within contract, but negotiating a year in advance, which is what we like to do, to then being 2 years in a row negotiating out of not necessarily out of contract. We're out of contract now, but 2 years in a row negotiating for the year to date as opposed to a year in advance like we'd like to be and is the norm. We continue to see fewer dollars making it to the classroom and to attracting and retaining teachers. This is a smaller percentage that gets smaller as we progress each year. We have $3 million new dollars ongoing that's coming to this district, and we feel that 60% is a reasonable percentage for teachers. We understand that 100% is too much of an ask. We'd like to see 100%. but we think 60% is reasonable. Last year, we made no movement towards closing the gap with our comparable districts. So it's really kind of depressing and frustrating to put that much work to see yourself go nowhere. In biology, we call it the Red Queen hypothesis, where you're running to stand still. And that's how last year felt, that when all was said and done, what we negotiated was exactly the same or very close to exactly the same as our comparables. The goal is to be closing that gap because we are at about 96% of our comparables, and we feel that at the very least we should be at 100% of our comparables, if not 104% like some of our admin. We see some difficulties financially currently, but we have now put $3 million towards upcoming additional retirement costs. And so that's going to go a long way towards that. And we're seeing this $3 million additional money, which is also going to go a long way towards that. We also see additional money in books and supplies that we haven't spent for many years in a row now. I haven't seen a new book adoption, at least at the high school, for many years. And we see additional money in deferred maintenance. So with that in mind, we'd like to have as quick a resolution as possible so that we can move on towards negotiating for next year, like we ought to be. And teachers have been contacting me a lot, and it's hard to not take action when we see no movement. Thank you.
All right, our next speaker is Ron Frazier.
Hi, I've been here before a couple of times, and I was inspired by an article on the 28th of last month concerning glyphosate. Excuse me, there's the copies. And I'm going to condense this, if I can see it. The mayor announced Nevada as glyphosate-free. Unfortunately, that's not the truth because it's been in the soil. And they spent 4 years of disregarding the facts that went national. And Dr. Huber came out to Marin County and helped stop the glyphosate use in the waterways, which I had good fortune to meet on a few occasions and was educated. What the article focused on was the award given of over 200 and close to 80 some odd $million to a school groundskeeper because they could associate his contact with glyphosate and his work. For me, I've spent over 30 years in focusing on toxic waste and trying to get companies to admit to situations. This is an historical judgment because in the past, it's hard to tell a company, your toxins caused me cancer. The truth is, I could say if I were a representative of a company, you're amongst all sorts of toxins. How can you indicate and establish the truth of that? But at any rate, Novato has a great opportunity here because this company, over years, has denied the cancer causation factor of its chemicals. And they did it by investigative or reporting bias, which simply means the company puts out a report. They buy someone to give a report that's got all the degrees and credentials, but simply they'll guide that report to say what they want to say. And that's how that comes out. Right now, Novato could be facing a lot of litigation because of that, when you consider that the dioxin on school grounds has actually had the potential to affect the students and the staff and, of course, the groundskeepers. And I would suggest only in this, and I'm condensing it, that you look at the chemical company because they basically lied to everyone. And now they're stuck with the bill. And get them, Novato needs to get them to clean up the soil around the schools and make that the circumstance and purpose of their venture to make Novato toxic free, but start with the students. Because there's something called bioaccumulation, and that means small amounts, low levels, build up in your body over time and have the potential to trigger the cancer that these factors have causation for. Thank you.
Yes, trustee Cooper?
I'd be interested in, based on the speaker's comments, to have the district take a look and report back about this issue.
Yes.
In the
Yeah,
future. Okay.
in agreement, yep.
I second that.
Okay. We will do that. Thank you. Move on to our staff reports. First one is the revising of the equity imperative, and Superintendent Hogaboom will be taking that as soon as he's done. John, no, make a note. Yeah. Take your time. Do you want to start the slideshow? Is that what you're trying? Yeah. Isn't it down in the right corner or something like that? Yeah. No. That took 20 people to help.
I am technologically
Team
competent
effort.
despite what you all think. All right. Thanks for having me. So this is really important. This is our revised equity imperative. And so, as I said in the background, we before I even came here, the board and the district was looking into equity and been working with the National Equity Project. We did a lot of training, the Leading for Equity Institutes that all of you have been to, all of our administrators have been to. This year we were able to offer that for our high schools, and so we offered that at Novato High and at San Marin. We spent about a year and a half drafting our initial equity imperative, and it really was a belief in what's important in our district and why, and kind of a philosophical statement, and we did have our equity goals. And so on January 17th, 2017, the board approved our original equity imperative, and so we have that with a goal. In the year and a half since then, the key ways that we've adjusted this are really to include more groups in our equity imperative. So we had a lot of conversations with our initial equity committee about whether we really wanted to be focused. And so the question is, do we focus it on poverty or do we focus it on race? And you could focus it on anything you wanted, but we thought it'd be more powerful to choose one. So after a lot of conversations, we focused it on race, because unfortunately race is still the single biggest predictor of student success, which is too bad, but it is. So we focused in on our Latino population, and as we've said many times, the overall district numbers of students meeting the A to G rate is in the 50%, and then for our Latino students it was 22. For our students in poverty, it was also about 20 to 22%. Last year I had some of our special needs parents ask why didn't we include special needs. We had some of our kids in poverty saying why didn't we include them, and then we have our EL students. So probably the biggest change this year is that we've expanded our equity imperative to include those 4 subgroups, which we have to report to the state anyway. So the other thing we did up here is we included a definition of equity, which we took from the Policy Institute in Oakland. So we define equity as just and fair inclusion into a society in which all can participate, prosper, and reach their full potential. So that was the biggest change, and we really wanted to make this a living document that we bring back to you every year. So in addition to kind of our stating our call to action and our challenge and our equity imperative, the goal we say is that we want all students to be able to demonstrate success with our graduate profile, as well as to meet the A to G requirements. That goal stays the same. The equity imperative is that some students are further away from that goal than others, namely those 4 areas. And then we will set some targeted goals there. I didn't include the targeted goals because we don't have our 17, 18 numbers yet, but we will have those pretty soon. So we'll bring it back to you one last time with those targeted goals for each of those 4 subgroups. So what I did want to spend a little time, because I'm assuming that you guys have read that and the way that we've kind of revised it, is This is really going to become the basis for our LCAP, because we've really decided that there are 11 strategies that we hope are going to make a difference and try to close that achievement gap. So equity is a huge topic, and to try to help organize that, we use the elements from this organization called BELL, which is Building Equitable Learning Environments Network, and they define the 4 kind of key areas to look at are students, staff, structures, and policies. So hopefully we're doing some things to address each of those. So we put the 11 strategies under each of those topics. So under students, the first 3 strategies are student voice, which we've talked a lot about, to empower students to advocate in their best interests. We'll continue to work with the Youth Leadership Institute to do that. Continue to include students and seek out their input on hiring panels, district priorities and goals. Obviously, our student trustees, which will be here next time. Leslie helps us to work with them and train them. We'll go to Sacramento and really ensure that each school creates a culture of belonging and inclusion with specific strategies and programs so all students feel that they belong. The second is to provide students with opportunities to learn about cultural competence. So we've kind of pulled out cultural competence as the 1C in particular that we want our staff to work on with our students. And we've identified the 4 bullet points underneath that. And so we want to really start giving them feedback so we can see if those rubrics are going to be helpful, so students know what it means to be culturally competent, which is things like being able to take another perspective and those kinds of things. And then finally, provide students with opportunities to review and reflect on their graduate profile regularly, and provide them with opportunities to demonstrate proficiency in the 6 C's. So that's working with our high school counselors, building time in the daily schedule. So as we revisit the idea of a high school schedule, I'm hoping that whatever schedule we come up with the block, we can have, whether you call that a tutorial period or some time when teachers can have students that are with them that can help give them feedback, so that by the time they get to be seniors and they can come up with a defensive portfolio, they've been able to get some advice and feedback on the 6 C's. And then finally, pilot the graduate profile performance assessments, also not only at the senior level, but at 5th and 8th grade. So 5th grade, as I'm mentioning, are looking at student-led conferences. 8th grade are looking at maybe a electronic portfolio, and then 12th grade is looking at a defensive portfolio. And actually the teachers at Novato High School have made a lot of progress, and both schools have a plan for how to do that, but they've been tweaking things that we already do, like the sophomore speech or the freshman research project, and make sure that we incorporate the 6 C's in there. So that's what we're doing with students. With staff, it's really about providing equity professional development training and support. So each of our schools has an equity team. And in the secondary, the National Equity Project will be providing support for those teams at the secondary level. On the Nancy Dome, with Epic Education, we'll be working with our elementary teams. And they'll kind of see where they are, and then hopefully they'll become the kind of like lead coaches at those schools, and then model some training for the other staff. We also will provide ELD training and support, and that's through Kevin Clark Consulting this year. And then finally, developing learning targets using an equity lens for all core subject areas. So math has been leading the way, as you guys know, with learning targets. And so this will continue that work for educators this year. Then we also need to look at the structures we have in place, right? So one thing we want to do is create or improve the use of an equity-driven data system. So our elementary schools are probably doing the best at using data, because they've had that P3 initiative now for however long that's been. We need to try to move that up to the secondary level. We want to ensure that we have coordinated structures and systems that enable intervention. So that could be summer school, tutoring, mentoring opportunities, looking to expand our AVID strategies. You guys heard last year how effective AVID was. So Amy's actually having a meeting with them pretty soon to talk about how do we expand those strategies. We're talking with AIM High about maybe getting a middle school, summer school program going, so we can make sure to give those kids an advantage going into high school. And then finally, analyzing school structures and systems to develop ways to deepen the opportunity for personalized learning at all levels. So we want to do some visitations to Lindsay Unified and some other places that are finding ways for teachers to be able to make connections with kids, and then maybe explore the use of learning management systems such as Summit, which we use at MBI, or Empower at the secondary level. And then lastly, with policies, we've talked a little bit about the idea of adopting the A to G college entrance requirements as our graduation requirements. That would begin with a our current sixth graders. So we could adopt it now, but we don't have enough interventions and support systems in place to make a big enough difference. Amy and Jen and I were in Promise and heard Diane, who's the superintendent up in Santa Rosa, talk about all the work they did, which about for 6 years to try to get that policy before it was approved up in Santa Rosa. So we think it's important to put a stake in the ground that says we want all of our students to meet the A to G requirements, but we know they're going to need some support and interventions and able to do that. So that's kind of the conversation we want to have this year, and we'll try to bring teachers and staff and parents and students on board with that and get their feedback. So we will see what they have to say and start those conversations. And then the second one is we need to look at our policies around grading practices. And that could include homework. Some of our schools have changed their homework policies in elementaries, but we're not all on the same page with that. So I think we need to look at our grading practices and make sure that those are fair and just. So that's kind of a quick explanation of our equity imperative and including those strategies in there. And then again, that will become the basis for our LCAP. And hopefully if we do those things and do that well, we will help to close the achievement gap. So I think I'll stop there.
Okay, and much of this is aligned with our LCAP, with what you have in here, so it's nice. Questions, Trustee Mack?
As always, great stuff. I'm very much in support of this. It's important. It's always been important to me. It's one of the main reasons why I ran for this office. So I'm glad we're still working on it. It's because it's never going to stop. Every year we got to do something. And in that vein, I almost might suggest a number 12 for policy. Maybe you're already thinking about it. Maybe it's down the road. But the whole idea of maybe replacing the SBAC in secondary or high school with an SAT, ACT. I think that would go a long way, not only toward just having a better test, but also too gives these kids a chance to, have everybody take the SAT. That's a big hurdle, and I'm sure a lot of kids just don't have the inertia to take it. Instead of taking the SBAC, take that, and then we have A to G, and then they have the pieces in place, or at least they're attempting to. So.
That's a good point. That's actually being discussed in the legislature. I don't think anybody thinks that just giving that test in 11th grade without being able to look at cohorts, I guess you could go back to kids, but when we give it, whatever 3rd through 8th, and then we just give it in 11th grade, and that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So I think doing something like that, there's a lot of support for that.
Okay, any further comments? This is just a staff report. It's an update to the board, and you'll come back with a final
Yes.
revision.
Yes.
Okay, good, great work. Thank you so much. All right, next up is the draft of the district priorities and goals for this year.
I have a question about the
Yeah.
final revision. When
Oh.
would that come back to us? When?
Amy, when should we have the final, results from last year? Do you know, end of October or something? So probably in the
November.
beginning of November, because October is going to be our single plans for student achievement. So I think the first meeting in October is our elementary principals, and the secondary is secondary. So, but I did want to make sure that you had seen these goals again, because it's what the school sites will be basing their site goals around. So we'll bring it back to you in November. Like that? All right, so these are we ready to move on to the next one?
Yes, we
Okay.
are, yeah.
So again, you've seen these before. This is a kind of the final draft of our district priorities and goals. You've weighed in on them to some degree. We went over this a lot with our district leadership team and our administrators. And we tried to make sure that we were a little more focused, and knowing that the schools have to come up with their goals as well. So we were using our same priorities of equity, student success, staff success, and community engagement. So these are our goals right here. So equity, increase the number of Latino, socioeconomically disadvantaged, special ed, and EL students meeting the A to G requirements. Those are those 4 groups I talked about before. Reduce the number of suspensions for special education students by 1%, and increase the number of English learners who are achieving progress on the LPAC. So if you recall, last year was the first year we switched from the CELT to the LPAC. So actually we gave both of those tests last year. This year it's just the LPAC, so we'll be looking for improvement there. And I think you also attached have some, we're trying to convert all of these to SMART goals. So you've kind of seen the preliminary part of that. We're still, again, waiting for the 17-18 results so we can kind of plug those in there in terms of the some of the A to G requirements and the LPAC and things like that, and the special ed students and the numbers who receive suspensions. So with student success, it was demonstrating progress towards a graduate profile, especially with cultural competence and using the rubrics that we have in place, developing and implementing a student wellness plan and support at every school. I was just at the Rotary the other day, and besides the budget, which I had talked about, one of the guys I said, well, what is the thing in the district that keeps you up at night? And so it was a good question. I had to think about it for a while, but I think it really is student wellness. I mean, the fact that so many of our students are under stress these days, the suicides we had last year, just so many kids are so frazzled. And so thanks to Kelly and her team, and Amy is really making sure that we have that wellness and support. And so it's not just counselors. Thank you guys for, and the LPAC, by the way, we did add, if I didn't mention it before, a newcomer counselor. So Marta's been our counselor, but we just hired Karina, who's going to be our elementary. So we just have too many newcomer students for one person. That's just kind of part of a student wellness, is counseling services and things. But there's kind of a whole plan that we're working on with Kelly that we'll bring back to you guys, I think, in a couple weeks. Because the socio-emotional health of our students, I think, continues to be at least something I'm thinking about, and I know you guys are thinking about that as well. And then finally, strengthen student-staff relationships and increase personalization at all levels. And some of these we will look at with the results of our Youth Truth Survey and that kind of thing. Staff success, this is more kind of a numbers of teachers that we've trained. So we're training all of our elementary teachers with the Readers and Writers Workshop, which is the new Lucy Calkins curriculum, and provides support. The cool thing about that training is do a lot of that coaching in the classroom. So it's not just necessarily all a sit and get thing, but you actually see the coaches come in and model those strategies in the classroom, which is great. By the way, we already have the two schools, San Ramon and Pleasant Valley, that have been doing this for a number of years, so they're actually able to help train the other teachers. And Amanda Davis is doing a great job. She's one of our two remaining coaches, and all her time is spent really providing that kind of support. Secondary teachers are looking at developing learning targets. Again, math is furthest along, but we want every department to have developed learning targets by the end of the year, and that's what the curriculum committees will work on. And then finally, ensuring all teachers are trained on culture responsive teaching practices, which will be done in conjunction with National Equity Project and with EPIC Education. And finally, our last three on community engagement. So Leslie helps us work on these, but one of them is strengthening district and school safety plans, ensuring physical safety and wellness plans that we just talked about. And we do use the Youth Truth Survey results to see how we're doing on that. Are we going to change you want to change when we're giving that this year?
Yeah, well, I think Sonia and I talked about doing it in December, but I think you were preferring to do it right after the winter break in January.
So last year, I think we gave it in March. So we're trying to find the right time to give that Youth Truth Survey so we can get the survey back and still be able to make enough changes and things in it. We also use it for the LPAC. So we haven't figured out exactly when to do that yet, but it'll be a little earlier than in the past. I had members of both our DLAC and special education parents tell me last year that we were not reaching out with them enough, and I think they're right. So this is second goal. I will be going to all the DLAC meetings. Kelly will also be having 4 special education parent nights. We have, I think, a small group of 3 or 4 or 5 parents that are going to help us with what their concerns are and reach out to them for their input. And then finally, engage students, parents, and community on district-related initiatives. So that's just kind of continuing our information out and getting our input back in. We still continue to meet with the North Marin PTA, different groups. We speak a lot, or I speak a lot at Rotary. We go out there, we work with the Chamber of Commerce. So that third goal is really just overall about community engagement. And when we finally get these done and we have the numbers from this last year, we will bring these back to you one more time as well. And again, I'm just bringing these to you now because these are the basis of the school plans. So they know that they're supposed to be using these to develop so that we're kind of working together on those.
Any comments from the board, additions, changes? Trustee Scott and then Trustee Miller.
Just question on the community engagement for the special ed and some of those meetings. Can board members attend, or is that just pretty much just for parents?
No, board members can attend those. Maria usually comes to the DLAC meetings, and sometimes you come to the special. Have you been to the special?
I've been to a
so-
couple of them, but I didn't know if this was something over and above that or just in addition to.
Yeah, no, you guys are more than welcome to come to those.
Okay, thanks.
And the special ed too.
Trustee Miller?
I'm interested in the, and I appreciate all this work, but I'm interested in specific measures of how we manage this, and I'm reflecting on the progress we made last year in the mathematics area and how we were focused on that, and because we not only dealt with these issues, but we also dealt with test scores and the results. We were able to implement and in fact measure a significant improvement in that program. And I thought that was a successful combination of different tools to affect change. How are we going to do something similar to this term? I heard you mention elementary reading and high school math explicitly, which brought me to this question. So how are we going to watch this improve our program? What are we looking at?
That's a good question, because so you're right, it's not specifically called out in the district portion like we've done in the past, and that's not to say, hey, we've made all this progress. I would say that in all of the site plans, really all of our schools will be looking at our English language arts results and our math results, and the most important thing there is to really disaggregate that data and also to look at the cohort data. And so that's why the K-8 or the 3 through 8 results are so much more helpful to us than just that 11th grade where you just pull that grade out. So when they come and show you the results, we will definitely try to show you those cohorts, and we'll look specifically at math and we'll look specifically at English language arts. So that's just kind of a matter of what we do, but we are continuing with that Cali 3-year program that we're doing in the past. We did lose Diane last year, and that was a huge loss, who was our math coach. But the good thing about it, I think, is that a lot of our teacher leaders at the sites are kind of picking up the lead on that. So again, they're probably furthest along with our learning targets. So we don't specifically call out math, but you'll see that that's built into all of our single plans.
All right, nobody else? Trustee Nell?
Yeah, I just wanted to weigh in general terms. I think superintendent's done an excellent job of sort of corralling these issues. The perspective I have about our goals is these are the goals that we are trying to improve on based on what we've learned from doing a lot of the steps that are in here, and so they're not arbitrary in a way, and it's good to see us address the issues that we know need to be addressed within the district. And I think that the way that this draft is coming together, the information that we're going to bring forward is going to help us demonstrate that we're working to improve and to get better. In particular, your comment on student success, where you talked about what keeps you up at night, and I think that the issue of wellness is an important, and it's also an example of the consequences if our students aren't well. And you mentioned something as awful as suicide, but it's also educationally related, because if you have a young person who's going through a traumatic time it could be anything. It could be the death of a pet, trouble at home, something's going on here and there, and you lose a child for a period of time. They fall behind in school. They fall behind in their education, and so that makes it harder and harder, and for them to catch up. It affects. We have to have a system more flexible to deal with that type of thing. So I think our attention to this matter is important. The issue of personalization, that comes from the student's voice directly. To a T, many of the students that participated in the programs that we put forward, not just the surveys, but the sessions or the classes that we had, they want to be taken seriously when they're making suggestions about how they want to be educated and what's relevant to them. And I really still don't think the adults get it sometimes. I think they just talk right past them and say, oh, yeah, sure, that's wonderful. You're so cute, but we're going to do it the way we've always done it for 33 years, so line up. And so I think it's important that we don't just brush over something that's coming directly from the students themselves, that we really need to personalize our education and our curriculum and our teaching and learning as much as possible. It's the future. And finally, I think community engagement is also important. It's an opportunity for us not to, we go out and we educate. We're trying to be proactive and say, this is how it works. Well, the benefit of us going out in the community and saying this is how it works is we want our community to learn what we're doing so that they can advocate for themselves or others, find out what the issues are. When they hear someone say something that sounds rather one-sided or non-specific, if they have information that's coming from us proactively, it gives them an opportunity to put it in context and relativity. So I think the investment and the time we spent on community engagement is well worth it, and the return is high. So I want to just appreciate the work that you and your staff have been doing, and I think we're headed in the right direction. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great comments, Trustee Nell. Thank you. Anybody else? No? Okay, so this will come back. Great work, and I like the multi-year metrics that you provide. Instead of just providing 1 year, you have 3 years worth of metrics, and that's, for me, I like to see that. All right.
Thank you.
And this,
Yeah, in November, once we get the metrics, the more current ones, yes. All right, we have a student enrollment and staffing update from Deputy Superintendent Koska.
I got big shoes to fill.
That's right, Chris.
See if you can actually get the PowerPoint. It's a tall order. It is, but I just had a tutorial on how to do it, so that's good. That's like staff training. That's good. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. So thank you for having me tonight. I'm here to talk with you a little bit about what enrollment and staffing looks like for the 2018-19 school year. So we'll start by not using this. So we have, when we look at our elementary enrollment, we see an unfortunate trend. Over the last several years, 6-7 years, we've seen a smaller incoming kindergarten class than we had graduating senior class, and that's resulted in our district being in declining enrollment. Last year, we worked with demographers to give us new projections to help us anticipate the number of kindergarten students we could expect during the 18-19 school year and then future years. Those projections showed a continued decrease similar to what we've been seeing. Unfortunately, in this year, we're seeing that pace of declining enrollment, declining size of our kindergarten class is even greater than they said it was. So we're seeing that our elementary schools are about 40 students less than we anticipated having. This is a challenge for our district. When you think about a kindergarten student, you think about a student that you're going to have in the system for 13 years. When those students don't come, that has a negative effect on our revenue. It will not affect our revenue this year, but will in future years, because when you're in declining enrollment, the state gives you sort of a pass for the first year of decline, gives you a chance to adjust your staffing for the second year. So unfortunately, some decline at the elementary level. At the middle school level, we also saw a slight decline. For some reason, and we're investigating this, San Jose's number didn't come in like we anticipated it to do. There are typically 3 places where you can lose students. One is at the very beginning before they come into kindergarten. One is that transition from elementary school to middle school, and then again at the transition from middle school to high school. And we're trying to figure out why we lost some students that would have matriculated from their elementary schools to San Jose Middle School. So Leslie does a report she works on with students who didn't return from the previous year, and then we'll present you with the results of that study when it becomes available. So slight decrease at the middle school level. At the high school level, we made up a little bit of ground. We have a little bit of dip at Novato High, which is not a terrible thing because the campus is getting pretty filled up, and a lot of those students moved over to San Marin. So we see a big increase at San Marin. Novato High has always had a strong draw with the MSA program and some of the other programs there. San Marin, we're starting to see the STEM program become a larger draw for students from either Novato High or even from outside the district as far as inter-district transfers. We see a lot of hard work paying off at Marin Oaks. Marin Oaks typically has started their school year in the high 50s as far as enrollment, and then that number's crept up through time, through the first month of school or so. This year we see them starting much closer to the number where we projected, actually above it. So some good news at the high school level. So overall, you see our enrollment, and this is day 5 enrollment. We're now at day 8. Just so you know, there hasn't been a significant change over time, a few students here or there. Our enrollment is 7375. Projected enrollment was 7388. So a difference of a negative 13. So we were pretty close, but we'd always like to see that number to be a positive number versus a negative number. Where you see so let me click back here. So that's overall enrollment. This is the enrollment relative to what we projected. Okay, on this slide, you see our enrollment, and that's at the very bottom. You see our enrollment compared to the number of students we had last year. So you can see that we're down significantly from where we were last year. Most of this has been anticipated and planned for in our budgets, but still, that's a number that we don't want to continue to see going down. Again, we want to see that flattening out. We thought we were closer to the time where that was going to start flattening out, and we got thrown a little curveball with our kindergarten students this year. So now let's shift gears real quick. When it comes to certificated staffing, you can see here that we hired 35 teachers. This is a little bit of an increase from last year when we hired 31. Some small numbers up there for my eyes. You can see the big areas where we hired teachers: 6 resource specialists, 5 math teachers, 4 Spanish teachers, 4 science teachers, 3 program specialists, 3 different kinds of art teachers, a couple of speech language pathologists, and then English history core teachers, 2 counselors, 1 B-clad elementary teacher, 1 temporary elementary teacher, 1 school psychologist, and 1 school nurse. So it was a busy summer and spring in human resources. Our principals have done a good job to make sure they find the right folks to fill these positions. And now it's our job to support them and do all we can to make sure that we're able to retain them. We also had a significant turnover in the certificated administrator rank. So you'll see that we hired 8 people into different positions or new folks, starting with Amy Carter, who's our new Assistant Superintendent of Ed Services, Jennifer Larson, a new Director of Teaching and Learning. Mark Brewer took over as the principal at Novato High School. Debbie Richardson took over as the principal at San Jose Middle School. Melissa Diaz starting up the new dual immersion program over at Linwood Elementary School, and then maintaining the Linwood program as we make that transition to dual immersion. Michelle Cortez, new assistant principal at Novato High School MSA. Leslie Smith, we combined a couple of the coordinator positions, and we're calling her new position the coordinator of equity. Again, with Catherine Nam, we combined a couple of the coordinator positions, and we're calling that the coordinator of teaching and learning. And then Karen Valentine serving in a new capacity. This is a position that's 100% funded by the Adult Education Block Grant. Can only be spent on adult education programs. And she is a part-time coordinator in that program. and helping to build that program to better serve our adult community here in Novato. We still have some vacancies that we're trying to fill. We have a .8 math teacher at Marin Oaks. That position is posted. We have a long-term substitute there. We're exploring whether or not that long-term substitute is credential eligible. She has an interest in doing the work. We have an interest in having her do the work. We just got to make sure that we can check all the right boxes and make that work. We still need a Spanish teacher at Novato High School that we're trying to fill. We don't like having teachers teach 1.2 positions. That's how we're filling it right now, because it's hard to get a substitute that can come in every day that's fluent in Spanish, and even if we do, they can typically only stay there for 30 days, so we don't want that revolving door. So our second best option is to have teachers covered as 1.2s. So that's where we are right now. We have a vocal music teacher position at Novato High School within MSA. So right now we have substitute teachers covering that, and they're supported by a professional expert, so somebody who is trained in vocal music that's supporting the classroom at this point. ROTC, we have a candidate that we're interested in, and right now we're working to determine placement on the salary schedule. It's a little bit different placing somebody from the Air Force because they have to, there's just a different set of rules. I'll stop there. And then we're still looking for a couple of speech language pathologists. So we have one person that we offered a .75 FTE to, and so we're hoping that we can wrap that one up, but we'll still have about 1.5 FTE left to fill at that point. I would imagine that after all those numbers, there might be a couple of questions, and that they might be about enrollment.
Trustee Scott and Trustee Milliken and Trustee Mack.
Just on the last slide quickly, you've posted it for .75 FTE, but the need is 2.3?
Yeah, so let me clarify. So we've posted all of those positions, and we have offered a .75 FTE position to one person. Yeah.
Thank you.
Trustee Milliken?
This is a little bit of a bird walk. We are now past Labor Day. Enrollment stabilized. All the parents who didn't think school really didn't start until after Labor Day have shown up. You really have pretty stable enrollment now that you're into Tuesday, the day after Labor Day. In years past, we've had significant movement because we misguessed how many students were going to be in each class, and we've had to shuffle. Sometimes, large percentages, more than 10% of the student body and the teachers they were assigned to. How did we do this year? How many, in terms of student impact, the quality of the delivery program that we provide to families and learning students?
We have not had to have significant shakeups of master schedules. There's some children we've had to move around, but no sort of wholesale changes like you're talking about where we were way off. We haven't had to adjust staffing at any of the schools, so we were in the ballpark. There's one student right now at one of our elementary schools who could potentially be overflowed because one of the classes is too big. But it's really pretty minimal impacts.
Okay, that's the good news, because it's the week before school starts you're hoping, and the week after school starts you're recovering. So
yeah,
thanks.
Absolutely. You mentioned the sort of the Labor Day bump. We don't see that anymore. I think we've been starting school before Labor Day for so long now that, and trust me, I was hoping we would. But we just aren't seeing that bump anymore. And that's really a good thing. That means people know when school starts and they're getting there then. Much better than having them come in a week.
Did you get the numbers for today already?
We have the numbers for today, no significant changes. Yeah.
Are you done? Trustee Mack?
Yeah, I would just add on to the scheduling thing. Obviously the MBI thing at Novato High was a bit of a wrench, but it seems like everybody handled it. So, but if we go to the certificated hiring, the 35 teachers slide. And this is just somewhat rhetorical, but maybe you can educate me. I can't help but notice that is heavily secondary, actually particularly high school oriented, and the stability in the elementary ranks. Mm-hmm. And there's only one elementary teacher, or maybe two. Okay. But can you just talk through why we see more stability in the elementary ranks relative to the secondaries?
Yeah, I think the elementary part is easier. We did see more transitions at the elementary school, but with the declining enrollment continuing to affect the elementary, we just didn't fill positions.
Okay.
So there's less classrooms at elementary. So this
Okay.
year we had 7 or 8 retirements, but we didn't have as many. We didn't need to fill those positions.
So it's more of a one-year
So
thing, you
it's an
think?
attrition. Well, we just, as you know, if you think about us losing 100 to 125 students a year at the elementary level, that's 4 or 5 teachers a year right there. So
Yeah, so it sounds like it's not some sort of like an ongoing phenomena as
Yeah.
much as it's just the way it shook out this year.
yeah,
Okay.
it's a little more complicated at the high school level, and I think that's why I just had a blue card pass me by. I didn't look
think
at
so
it,
too.
but I think
I
so.
knew I'd get that when I asked this question.
I did not.
We saw a lot of teachers leave Novato High this year. You know, we've done some work on the exit surveys to look at that, but you know, we saw more teachers. Most of the teachers that we filled positions for were at Novato High. So we got to figure out what
Administrators
that's
too.
about.
Could we go to high school enrollment slide, please? The question there is, no, the total high school enrollment. There you go, yeah. So you're commenting on the inters coming in for inter-district transfers coming in for San Marin. Can you quantify that? And just, you know me, I'm always trying to get an understanding of what we're pulling in from other districts.
Yeah,
for STEM.
this year, and Yancey, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's in the low 20s. We had about 22, 23 students come in from outside of the city of Novato, so outside of our boundaries, into San
STEM.
Marin.
And STEM in particular, would you say? Was that the
Mostly
or is it
STEM.
hard to say?
Yeah,
Okay.
mostly STEM.
Okay. So just getting a sense for
Yeah.
the gravitational pull, which is always a good thing.
And that's a change. That's a big change that we
Right.
didn't used to see students coming in for that.
Well,
program.
they're
We'd see
coming
a
into their
few.
own,
Yeah.
which is what it's telling me, which is wonderful. Just like MSA is doing, and I'm getting to guess MSA's pace is somewhat in that ballpark as well. But we don't need to get into that.
Then we're also seeing more intra-district transfers from Novato High to San Marin for their specialized programs. So the flow back and forth is more evening out, whereas
If
it
I
used to
might-
be more from San Marin to Novato High.
If I might speculate, I think that has to do with sports as well, but I'll leave that as it is. Then getting to the elementaries, and the one thing that catches me is that it's the 2 biggest schools that saw the biggest drop. And I'm just almost wondering if people are looking for smaller schools. I mean, wonder if they're shifting around, but that's just a thought, you know. Well, Hamilton and Loma are both 400, and they both had, the biggest drops are larger schools, is what I'm trying to say. And Hamilton.
PV lost a
No, but
bunch.
Well, yeah, and PV as well. Yeah, so the big schools seem to be dropping the most. Just a thought.
Yeah, that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah. I was looking for some sort of geographic thing there, but I can't see it now. At first, I thought it was Southern Nevada, but it's kind of spread out.
Yeah.
Then last question, I apologize for hogging, but can we just really quickly go through the revenue per lost 39 students there, and then do it for middle as well as high school? Just to
Yeah.
quantify the numbers?
I'd say it, but I'd probably say it so smoothly, then next time Yancey came up, it wouldn't be
We
quite
need
as
Yancey.
smooth. So I'll have him come up and say it his way.
Dun, 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 dun.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Our average revenue on a per student basis is about $9,000. That's a little lower at the elementary school and a little higher at the high school level. There's also, it has to do with what students they are. As our funding is now a weighted formula that weights in English learners and low-income students and foster students, it depends on what student. But I think using an average about 9,000, so you're talking about 350,000 annually. One thing I would note is one thing that is positive that I can say about the state is that they do give us when districts in declining enrollment are funded on the higher of their current year or previous year ADA. So this $350,000 impact when I come into the budget, if these numbers stick through through to CBEDS, will be in the out years. So these will be 2019, 20, and beyond revenue. So it's important to note that. But it also is important to note that we're also being funded. This 39 students is 39 below our projected enrollment, which was already down 110 students. So now you're talking really about 150 students, which you're talking in the $1.3 plus million range of revenue that we are receiving this year for those students that we will not be receiving in the out years. But our multi-year projections that were approved in the adopted budget already include that reduction in the out years. So
Right, and if I might reiterate too, and I even fell into this trap myself, you look at the 13 overall, you need to be careful with that because that's represented by kids that have 2 or 3 years left in our district versus 39 kids right there that have 13 years left in our district. And that's where the impact is. So I know you guys already said that, but I want to reiterate that because I almost fell into the trap. Oh, it's only 13 times 95. No, it's not.
This year and every year.
Right. Yeah, there's all these extra out years we got to worry about. So, okay. That's it.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Yep. I have trustee Aguila, trustee Cooper, and then trustee Scott.
Yeah, thank you very much for this. I was wondering about, so these numbers come after, that's it, there will be no more changes, no expected changes, no transfers, no intra-transfers or inter-transfers?
The one thing that we know for sure is that there will be more changes. We just don't know exactly what they'll be, and they'll be subtle. I mean, 2 years ago, we grew steadily over the course of the year. We ended up picking up another 40 or 50 students over the course of the year. Last year, we ended up declining over the course of the year to the tune of 25, 30 students. So it's tough to predict what's going to happen over the course of the year. I don't anticipate any big changes. I was hoping after, we looked at day 1 or day 2, I was hoping that, the Monday following that, we'd get a boost to students, but we just really didn't.
Okay. And is there a reason why the charter school's not in here, or did I miss it?
Because they don't affect our revenue.
Uh-huh.
So their attendance, their enrollment is staying very steady at 270, 271 students.
That's right.
So they've been within, the highest I've seen them is 271, the lowest I've seen them is 269.
And they themselves are, right
Very
now, they're
stable.
stable. Okay,
Yeah.
well, that's interesting. I was wondering about the exit exams, or exit surveys. I know that, for example, we've been, Trustee Scott's been talking about the exit surveys for the teachers. I'm wondering about the surveys for the students. And you said you're working on it. You're going to give it out.
Yeah, Leslie works on that.
Right.
that
Thank
survey
you.
for us.
Now, are we including the possibility of losing our students over private schools or charter schools or home teaching?
Yeah, so we
things like
reach
that?
out to the families that were enrolled with us and then chose to go somewhere else in another year, whether it was to a private school or to a charter school or whatever. Even if they moved, yeah. And then we try to figure out why they didn't return.
Okay, but
And then we give you that
that's an
report.
open-ended question. They can answer however they want.
Mhm.
Those options are there, right? Okay. And of course, the surveys are in Spanish as well. Okay, wonderful. And please number the
Number the pages?
Thank you.
Great, will do. That would be helpful to me too.
Trustee Cooper.
Most of my questions have been answered, but I do have a couple remaining, and they revolve mostly around the dual immersion program.
Mhm.
Can you tell me, are all of those dual immersion classes full?
The dual immersion classes are very close to full.
Okay.
They're probably typical with the rest of our elementary classes. So the classes that are supposed to be 24, 22, 23, 24.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then are there many or how many students come from outside intra-district transfers?
This year, it's all Novato students.
Okay.
Yeah. That's something we're going to have to.
Because that was going to be a big, I mean, that's a potential, we've talked about
That's
this
a,
hundred
yeah,
times.
I think that's more of a big picture goal than a first year goal. Yeah,
Agreed,
yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
And then I found it interesting that psychologists and nurses are fully staffed, because it seems like in the past,
Oh, I thought he had one up there that he was.
those have always been hard to fill.
Yeah, so the nurses are fully staffed. We continue to struggle to staff with our own psychologists. So we have contracted with some agencies to
Okay.
provide us with some psychologists.
So it's
So
still the
we
same.
still have some what I would consider to be we have the supports in place for students, but we want to have all those folks be our employees
In-house,
versus
right.
contract employees.
Great, thank you.
Trustee Scott?
So Maria, I appreciate you talking about the exit interviews. I'm just curious when the board might see that data. That's always really important for us in terms of culture. Why are these teachers leaving? Is it salary? Are they literally going down to Southern Marin and making more? Is it housing? Is it culture? I'm interested in knowing what that is so that we can, if there's an opportunity for us to patch that, we can. So I'm curious when that data might come to us.
Let's
Any
plan on getting
ideas?
that data to you in October.
October, okay. And then second question,
It's November. It gets pushed back a little bit because of the SIPSAs. So November. Thank you, Leslie.
okay. The other question, tell me, I think it's 10 days for like elementary. I think if you want to change schools, that's not your district boundary lines. I think you have like 10 days after school starts before you get those interdistrict transfers. Are there any people on the waiting list in terms of getting into any of our other schools, either elementary, middle, and/or high school?
Yes, there are some folks that are still on waiting lists. We still review them, and we let folks know as space is available.
So when's the
it's-
date?
There's no date when it stops.
That
So
was my question.
Okay, help me. I'm not sure I understand.
Okay, so intra-district transfer requests have a deadline in the spring.
Okay.
And then through the spring into summer, we're reviewing, we're approving them as we identify space, and then that continues through the school year. We continue to look, and if there are folks on the list and we look at a school and they have space, then we'll offer that transfer to them. They can accept it or decline it at that point. But there's not a date and time when that.
Okay, it's not like, for some reason, I have it in my mind that
Yeah.
after 10 days after the start of school, then those parents get notified as to whether or not, like, say you want your child to go to Pleasant Valley, but you're districted for
I think, yeah.
San Ramon.
Yeah, I think I know where that came from. I was communicating with a parent that looped you guys into that communication. And what I was doing was letting them know that, we do the attendance counts the first 10 days. So we're looking at it daily during the first 10 days. And so during
Okay.
that time, we're approving and declining, we're approving the person who's first
So
on
you
the
know
waiting
where I'm
list
coming from.
during
That's
that time.
exactly
Yeah.
what I was referring to, because I
Yeah.
hadn't heard of that before, and I
Yeah.
thought, oh, well, that's new information for me. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those are the 10 days when we're looking at attendance every single day.
Okay, all right. I just didn't know if there was some folks still waiting on the waiting list, and if so,
Yeah.
when were we going to get to them? Okay.
All right, that is everybody up. Trustee Nell.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about the new hires.
Yes.
And I appreciate the board. A lot of my questions were asked and answered, and we're learning. But on the certificated hiring page, this issue, just to be clear, these are not 35 new positions. These are rotations or turnover on existing positions, with maybe the exception of, I think you mentioned adult ed. That was at an administrative level.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the case, right? We are essentially, these positions churned at least one cycle for all of them. And on a percentage basis, it's a fairly high number. So I think it's fair to say that we're all aware that this is an issue and that we have a lot of different factors when it comes to attracting and retaining consistency here when it comes to our faculty and the people who teach our children. So it's a high level of importance, and we definitely want to do something about it. You know, there are obvious things like cost of living, housing, et cetera, but there's also competition, and competition has to do with the other districts, the ability to pay more than we can. But I think there's another factor, and that's fit. Essentially, I don't think it's fair to assume that every single position that turned over there is because the competition was greater or was too expensive to live. There's a high probability that there's a percentage of individuals there that just really weren't a good fit for the Nevada Unified School District and the level of expectation that we have for our educators here in this district. And that rises to the surface, and we work it out and decide, maybe you'd be happier somewhere else, or et cetera, et cetera. But I just think it's fair to say that not every single turnover that we experience at this district is a direct result of what we can't do. That in fact, a lot of the turnover is based on what we can do. And what we can do is do the best at hiring and retaining the best educators we can for our students. So I think it's important to have that part of every conversation when we're discussing turnover.
Yeah, I'd estimate, Trustee Nell, I'd estimate that's about 25% of so about 8 or 9 of
Right.
the folks on that list.
So the polite way to say it is, not a good fit. I prefer didn't meet our expectations, but we'll leave it as not a good fit.
Yeah.
That should be in the data as well, in
Yeah, I
terms of
think
the
so.
feedback and the reports that come back.
I think I kind of want to touch a little bit on the cost. When we talked about funding per student, and there's been this discussion about, we're not hit with that this year. We're hit with that in the out years. But I think it's also important to say that we're not able to do anything about the expense associated with that either. Our contract and state law requires we're not able to take action for a year. We have contracts, we've hired people on the assumptions of these projected enrollment numbers, and when they come in short, we have to continue to employ these individuals. We gave them a contract, they have to work here. So I just think it's just kind of a wash perspective that so when I hear people say, well, but we're not going to suffer from that for a year, well, the truth is it's a wash today, this year. And then when we get to the point where we're receiving less funding, at that point, we'll probably enter into fewer contracts and full-time employees, et cetera. So budgeting and personnel is a big part of what we do here. The focus is about educating children, but sometimes we do talk a lot about the adults who work here.
Yep.
And I think we got to remember what the focus is. All right, thank you.
All right, great conversation. Good questions. I think this is the most we've had on this particular topic.
It's good.
Yeah, no, it's great. Okay, thanks, Chris.
All right, my pleasure.
Oh, I do. I apologize. I'm looking right at it here. Yes, I do have a blue card. Thank you. Aaron Fix.
Hi, I just wanted to comment on a few of those issues. So one thing I can say about the disparity between elementary and high school is that we are comparable in salary and benefits to Santa Fe Elementary, and we're about $15,000 to $20,000 behind Santa Fe High. So even though those schools are not officially on our comparables list, they are about 10 miles away, and they do draw our teachers. And I can speak to many teachers I know, some really good teachers at Novato High that left not necessarily for just that reason that they could make more, but simply that they just couldn't make enough here. So they're moving to places like Oregon, back east, somewhere where the cost of living and the salary tends to line up more, because they're kind of two sides of the same coin. Is if cost of living is too high, that means salary is too low. In terms of our hires, I do think that's a large number, right? So we had 35 on that list plus 5 to 6 unfilled. So that's looking at around 40, 41 teachers, which is looking at about 10% of our staff. And I do think that dollar amount is a very significant piece of that. While there are people that are not reelected, eventually we fill those positions with full-time people. And so every district has non-reelects. What every district does not have is the amount of turnover that we do. And again, I know it sounds like a broken record, but it's the number one predictor of whether you're going to stick. My sister teaches at Terra Linda in the Santa Fe High District. We're both at step 15 or equivalent. She has one more year. I have a few more credits. She's making $20,000 more than I am. She is making about $10,000 more at step 15 than is on our salary schedule at all, right? So step 24 is still $10,000 less than their step 15. So if I'm a young teacher looking to start a family, buy a house, right? It's just the bottom line. We can do a lot of good things for our teachers, and we do, and that's great. Some of those things cost more money than others. I'd like to save money where we can, but again, putting that money into the classroom is going to be what's best for kids. You know, it is a little loud. A little bit real quick, just we're talking about staffing from a ground level perspective. Many of our teachers in Novato High are over 155 and over 34 in terms of their class list. So that's still 2 to 3 weeks out that we have to get that sorted. So just to put it on the radar. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we'll move on to the next staff report is our Wonder World update from Tim Rocco and Jen Larson.
Good evening. Thank you for having us tonight. So we are going to give you a little update. We're going to try and be brief because I'm sure you'll have questions, but where we are with the Wonder World rollout. So 2 years ago, or fall of 2017, we began rolling out devices, and we started with the 5th grade, the 5th grade, 6th grade, and 9th grade. This year expanded it, and so this year we have actually Chromebooks in the hands of all 3rd through 7th graders and 9th through 11th graders. So the 2 grade levels left to roll out to next year are 8th grade, and then 12th grade, they'll matriculate up. So when we get 9th grade next year, we'll be completely 3rd through senior year. A little note on that. As you're visiting schools, you will notice that quite a few of the students in those groups of students that were not rolled out to do have devices in their hands because we had so many Chromebooks from previous purchases from a variety of different locations that those carts in very many cases were broken up and distributed out in addition to this rollout. So we actually do have Chromebooks in just about the hands of all of our students from 3rd grade on. All in all, we had 2,500 more devices rolled out. The biggest difference that you'll notice is that we went with HP Chromebooks, and Tim can certainly talk a little bit more to why we decided to move and shift the company that we were going to be using from here on out. With 2,500 more Chromebooks comes a whole lot more teachers that need some professional development on how to use those effectively in their classrooms. We went ahead and offered the Summer Institutes again. We had one 2-day in June, another 2-day in August. We also had some small group trainings throughout the summer as teachers requested them. Amanda Davis was very accommodating, and in addition to working on all that she's doing with the literacy rollout in the TK5, she's also a master in technology integration into the elementary and middle school classrooms especially, and so she was working on some of those with the teachers. The sessions that we offered over the summer were managing classroom technology, Google Classroom training. We did do a lot more with Google Apps in addition to just Classroom, and then the rollout of the technology scope and sequence. As you know, Summer Institute is a tricky one because the teachers are often on vacation, so we also offered several after school opportunities once the school session came back in for that same, rather than 2-day, we did it in a 1-day. And then we also did a whole staff workshop at both Novato High and San Marin, as that's where the majority of the new Chromebooks were rolled out to. Those both happened in the first weeks of school as the teachers were returning. Ongoing trainings that we have planned for the year, the technology scope and sequence implementation. So now that the curriculum is there and in the hands of teachers, we are going to be supporting through our department and also IT, going into classrooms and ensuring that the teachers are comfortable with rolling out that curriculum. We'll be doing model lessons as needed, training sessions as needed, and then supporting teachers one-on-one as they start putting those into action. Where we have the most need for some planning is in the high school. In the elementary schools, it's 5 lessons, it's 1 teacher, they're going to be responsible for 5 lessons. In the middle and high schools where the kids are moving, there needs to be some common agreements within the school as to which department or which classes those are going to be delivered in. And so we'll be working on supporting the principals at each of those schools to determine where the best places may be. In addition, one thing that just came up today, actually, in conversation was the need for Chromebook basics. It came to our attention that we've spent a lot of our time in our technology training on how to manage the classrooms or how to manage a 21st century learning environment, but we haven't ever done a training on what's different between a Chromebook versus an iPad versus a laptop computer. And a lot of our teachers aren't aware of those differences. So we're designing a Chromebook basics workshop that we can start rolling out. The last is Google Apps for Education, which of course includes Google Classroom, which I think if you've been at open houses back to school nights, you're hearing in just about every classroom that they are starting to use that, at least dabble in it, so that the kids are starting to get some experience with that at very young ages. And then the one that's not up here that we're all very excited about and we didn't have scheduled and when I made this presentation is Data Matters. Elementary's going to start rolling that out next week. So we've put together a schedule with Alex, and he has a team of people who will be supporting him. And he'll be doing rollouts and training sessions at Wednesday meetings. As that schedule comes out, I'm happy to add that in if any of you would like to see one of those in action. So that's an exciting, I'm hoping that we will have every school trained within the next 6 weeks or less, so that we know that that's in the hands of our elementary school teachers.
Good evening, trustees. Coinciding with these projects are a couple of other things, and it made sense to try and touch on them real briefly to keep you up to speed. The first one is the teacher toolkit. The teacher toolkit is components of hardware and software that are going to be going out to each classroom. The thing about both the teacher toolkit and the model classroom, which I'll discuss in a second, to keep in mind is that these processes are iterative. This is what we're starting off with, and certainly we're expecting to collect feedback and to hear the good and the bad about what we're doing with these things. But this is where we stand now. So with the hardware into each classroom, we're going with a large television that's going to be connected to a Windows computer mounted onto the wall, together with audio enhancement and an iPad. The software that is going to use that hardware is really predicated around the idea that we're going to be doing screencasting and screen recording. The screencasting is going to work in such a way where the teacher will be able to share their screen with all of the devices in the classroom, all of the Chromebooks, or vice versa. The students will be able to take over the large screen television in the front using the software. Also with this is if you're following iOS developments, and the latest version of iOS, you can do screen recording right from the iPad. So we see that as a powerful teaching tool to be able to record your lesson on the fly as you're doing it, sort of your own Khan Academy that you could develop to where you could decide when you want to record and to be able to do that. The model classroom piece is really more around classroom design, furniture, color, flooring, those types of things. We have 2 model classrooms right now that we're rolling out. That's at Lou Sutton and San Jose. Those are places where we've had opportunities to work with the folks in Bond and to be able to get some of the flexible furniture. And those rooms are painted. They look fantastic. If you're on those campuses, I'd encourage you to come and take a quick look. With that. Yeah, that is.
That's San Jose. Lou Sutton's is still somewhat under construction, but these are, and you really should go see it because this is.
I've seen that one.
Yeah.
When is Lou Sutton gonna be done? Month?
No, I would anticipate, well, first of all, San Jose, we just got the word today that there's, some of the basics are finished. So I had a couple of people over in San Jose plugging in some of the hardware that I was just talking to you about, because we have that there as well. Lou Sutton, I think, is a little bit behind. I'm looking for Mike. I don't see him. If I'm making a guess, a week or two.
I have a question.
Trustee Mack and then Trustee Scott.
A quick question on the furniture. I know when we were looking at different districts, some of the stuff we saw, like in Napa, where they had individual desks with area underneath for holding their books and completely articulating desktop on rollers. You could just do anything with these things. But are we staying away from that, going more toward tables as kind of a group type of situation, or a little of both?
So, like the model classroom that you're referring to, which was out at Hamilton, all of those materials are still here in 203, and we're using that as a training room for our staff. So I would say that a decision hasn't necessarily been made. This is more of a kick the tires and see how it feels. One thing I noticed first off with this particular type of furniture was the desks also don't go up, they tilt. So yes, they can be standing, but not in the sense that we've had them in the past. So I think you're going to see a variety of a lot of different furniture in all of these rooms until they make a decision.
Okay, but is it safe to say we're probably trending more toward tables than we would individual desks?
Right now, the teams who have been working on this tend to be leaning towards a more table, something on wheels, definitely something
sense.
movable,
Yeah.
but tables, and they tend to like something that is a little bit more narrow and fits two people typically, but makes a not too wide square when they push them together.
Got it. Okay. And then a question for Tim, just really quick on how'd it go with students returning with their Chromebooks this year? Do we have much issues over the summer with them? Did they all come back?
That's a good question, and the best answer I have for that is that we have not heard a lot.
Okay.
So I take that as a good sign, honestly.
This is good news. Yeah. Okay.
Trustee Scott.
So with any new equipment and software, there's always technical difficulties. What happens in the classroom if they are having technical difficulties? Do they call the help desk? Or, I mean, I don't know. At my place of business, when we have an issue, I call the help desk, and then they send an IT guy to me, and they fix whatever my problem is. Do we have something like that available for our teachers as well on campus, or is that we have to switch to a different kind of a lesson plan and come back to this another day?
No, we have a technician at each site that would be
Perfect.
available to
Oh, wow,
service
that's
that.
great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, anybody else? Trustee Miller, you don't have a?
Well, there's actually,
your-
now that you, now, so no, I want.
I opened
you-
up a can of worms. Yes.
There was one of the slides, and that's not the one, talked about software and the Chromebook software, two-way this. So clearly, the hardware is easy to visualize. We're gonna have a large screen, a 48-inch or something, 50-inch screen. Instead of a projector, we're gonna go to screens. That's a change. It's gonna be set up so either the instructor or any one student can cast their screen content to the large screen, and I guess to every other person's screen, so they can basically, if I'm going to talk, my content shows on all 30 students and the big screen, or is that?
Yeah, so in each classroom, right now in these model classrooms, you'll see a 75-inch TV.
Okay.
And the software that is running, we're purchasing an Intel NUC, which is a small form factor computer, and that's running software called Mirroring 360 Pro.
Okay.
And the nice thing about Mirroring 360 Pro that really works well for us in our environment, for many people, you'll think of an Apple TV.
Mm-hmm.
This is the same sort of functionality that an Apple TV has. The thing that's nice about Mirroring 360 is that it works cross-platform. It works on Windows, it works on Mac, it works with iPads, it works with everything.
So in that sense, I sort of understand the physical improvement. The part that, and then the bottom line says two-way screen share, and we just talked about that. I think it's on the next slide, you start saying, well, we're using Google Documents, and you're starting to itemize the tools that you're using in the classroom. And I'm really interested to see that. And I guess what I want to do is make an appointment with you and walk through this and take, maybe take the training, the one-day training explicitly, because I think conversations here is probably so limited, I can't get a sense of it. So I guess that's what I'd like to do is schedule a time when you do the next training and I can attend as a class member.
Yep,
Yeah.
be happy to.
Trustee Gila.
Then I'll have questions.
Okay, yeah, great. We count on you for this topic.
So we talked about Novato High and we talked about San Marin and our students receiving this technology. What about our special ed? Are the teachers in the special ed, are they getting, because I know that there's some teachers that could use new computers, and so I think is the time.
So in terms of student use, our special ed students absolutely have Chromebooks. If we're talking about teachers, all teachers will be a part of the technology toolkit, and that will include every classroom and every classroom teacher. I do know that in the same kind of line as that question, there are groups of staff members that sometimes are overlooked, counselors, deans, that don't fit necessarily into the administrator or the teacher pool, but that is definitely something that's been accounted for, as well as what would their needs look like. Clearly, it's not a classroom toolkit, but certainly making sure that they have updated technology. But yes, special ed is certainly involved in that.
So it's correct that it's true that not yet. They're still the teachers not yet, but they will.
The teacher toolkits have not come out yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but all teachers in special ed will have their toolkit.
If I may just tack on to the end of that, this is actually a conversation that Kelly and I had 2 or 3 weeks ago. And so we took from her staff list, and just recently we had gone through and we had upgraded many of the computers for the staff at the high school. And just based on my experience in other districts, I know the problem that you're describing, and sometimes those people are overlooked. So at the beginning of this school year, we did look to double down on that and make sure that those people are covered.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Superintendent Hogaboom has a comment.
So just 2 quickies on this one in terms of the bond. So the teacher toolkit up there was the #1 priority from the bond implementation committee, just so you guys are aware, to make sure that students and teachers have what they need in the classroom. And the other one that I think we overlook sometimes is just the furniture. I mean, you guys are talking about technology, but Greg, you were asking about tables or chairs or whatever they have, and I think that we sometimes forget, furniture's not that important. When I was at San Marin, the Spanish teacher that I was visiting said, hey, come look at my classroom, and she's got 34 individual desks in there, and she said, hey, I'm a pretty traditional teacher, but I really want to get tables in here so I can get some groups and stuff going. How does that work? Well, for one thing, the bond only, the furniture replacement was only for about 1/3 of the classrooms, just so you know. So that's the amount of money that was put in there. I forget how much it was, 5 or 6 million, but that's only to do 1/3 of the classrooms. So we have to figure out the process we're going to use to how do we get those. But she's like, hey, I want to get this in my classroom. And for her to ask that was pretty amazing, just because, again, she said, I'm a pretty traditional teacher, but I want to start doing more group work. I want to start doing more projects. And that's where having that furniture in there, that whatever, teachers are all different, but being able to support them is really, really important with that.
All right, nobody else? All right. Could you just send us that PowerPoint in your Friday update? Because there's a little more information in there then. Thank you. Thanks, Tim, as well. Appreciate it. All right, moving along is the lease back presentation with Yancey, and he stepped away with the presenter. He doesn't realize we're on schedule finally. Well, not really, but we're close. We're close. And he's got the next item, so we can't move much further. He's got the next 4 items. Or Mike's got the last two. Oops.
Thank you. I appreciate your patience with me. When you're paying your attorney to be here, I try to maximize the time, but get every last piece of information. But I do apologize. So I would like to introduce Lauren Sukup. She is our attorney from School and College Legal. And so our presentation tonight is around leaseback delivery methods. And so there are three main delivery methods for construction in the state of California, two of which are the primary. Those are typical, the design, bid, build, and then the leaseback method. We've used both in the past at Nevada Unified. This summer, we did 5 projects, all on a design, bid, build schedule. But we have used leasebacks in the past, mostly for specialty projects. I think the last one in this district was the remodel of the Novato High School pool. And so that was a leaseback. So as with anything, there are pros and cons to both delivery methods. And the real reason I'm bringing this back, because I know the board understands leasebacks and they understand delivery methods, was about 3 or 4 years ago, there was a case in Fresno that you've probably read about. And basically, Fresno Unified was really misusing the leaseback regulations to pretty much give the contracts to anyone they wanted to for, I won't say, I won't note why I think they might have been doing that, but they were not, really going through a good process through that. And the courts, I think, very understandably ruled against the school district. And so with that, the legislature stepped in. And so this is after the pool project. So leasebacks have now, the regulations around that have changed. And the legislature really increased those regulations around to really put in a process to move forward with the leaseback. It used to be that, while districts like Nevada Unified and most other districts were doing a full process and making sure that they were getting best value out of their contractor, they were doing pre-qualification of those contractors. The legislature really codified that in law. And so Lauren tonight will go over some of those regulations so that the board is aware of that. That being said, there really is not a huge change from anything that Nevada Unified was doing in the past around leasebacks, so that it doesn't really concern us of the additional regulations that have been put in place around leasebacks. And then just kind of skipping to the end, it will be my recommendation, if the board is comfortable, to move forward with the 4 projects, which I think might be 2 projects at the end of this evening, at the 2 high schools for many reasons that I can get into later. But I did want to give the board this information. So I'm going to open up this presentation.
Good evening, board members. Thank you for having me here tonight. I am going to be going over the various aspects of leaseback, talking about the pros and cons and the changes that happened in the new code that was effective January 1st of 2017. And then at the end, feel free to ask me any questions that you may have, and I'm happy to hopefully address any of those. So the 2 primary options for selecting a contractor for your bond projects are the design, bid, build, the public bidding requirements, and the leaseback option. The current code exists in 17406 of the Education Code, and generally what this provides is that the district can lease its facilities to a contractor, provided that that contractor will be performing construction, modernization improvements on the district's property. And then in turn, the contractor leases the facilities back to the district. And there is generally a lease period once the project is completed, in which lease payments are made to the contractor for the final portion of the project amount. So this code was originally designed to be a financing mechanism for school districts. The contractors would carry basically the financing on these projects. And over time, it became a mechanism that allowed districts to get out from the bid, the general design bid build, and that's where the legislature stepped in, made some changes to the code, added a lot of more regulations around, and now we have a very nice code section that truly memorializes the process that districts are required to use, creates a fair process, and gives you confidence that obviously the code is being used in the appropriate manner, since it was intended originally to be a financing mechanism. So the process for selection of leaseback contractors includes the board adopting a resolution or policy that it will be using the leaseback process for these particular projects. You'll be required to publish procedures and guidelines for how you will be evaluating and conducting this process. Our office has template forms of all of these requirements. And CSBA also has their template policy, which is a good one, that most districts just will adopt that template. The requirement under leaseback is that a best value determination be made, and that best value be conducted in a fair and impartial manner. And the best value is based upon various factors which staff and the board can determine, but it generally includes qualifications, price, and then interviewing with references and interviewing of the contractors themselves. In addition, there's a pre-qualification process, and that is required of all general contractors and all mechanical, electrical, and plumbing subcontractors. So with leaseback, it is mandated now that all of those contractors be pre-qualified in order to be eligible to perform work on these projects. And then once the code now requires that we issue a request for proposals, so that it's very specific what criteria we're looking for, and that we mandate that the contractors provide us with a very specific proposal in response to the RFP. One additional point I'll make is that the code changed also the requirement that all subcontractors on these projects, the contractor must follow this exact same process in hiring all of their subcontractors. So that's a very important piece that they added, so that there is a specific requirement in hiring the subcontractors as well. Generally, the RFP in the code, these are the specific requirements that they mandate the RFP include. An estimate of the price of the project, a precise description of any pre-construction services that may be required. Prior to this code change, it was unclear whether or not the code anticipated that we could use the contractors to perform pre-construction work, meaning pre-DSA work. And out of the Fresno decision, they held that there was a conflict of interest, potentially under the old code. And so when the legislature came in and revised this code, they acknowledged that districts could use the contractors to perform pre-construction services, but again, they put a lot of regulation around that. And they required that there be a specific fee percentage required, that the district require that ahead of time from the contractor. And then it requires that if they do come in to assist the district with pre-construction services, that the final total project amount is still subject to board approval. So once DSA approval is obtained, the contractor has to come back and basically justify their final project amount to you, which you then have to approve. And so it allows you the ability and some flexibility. But as if you have had contractors perform pre-construction services, it can be it can be very beneficial to the district. It helps to eliminate change orders. Obviously, having the contractor working with your architects and engineers to design these projects, it just makes sure everyone's on the same page very early on, which can eliminate a lot of problems through the project process. So the RFP must also include key elements of the contract. In ours, we just include the actual contract in there so they know exactly what they're going to be required to sign. Description of the format to be followed and elements to include standard to be used in evaluating the proposals, exactly how we will score those proposals and how we'll be determining what the best value is. The date when the proposals are due, and then the timetable for review and evaluations of proposals. The RFP must identify the scoring criteria, as I mentioned, and once proposals are received, the district is required to score them according to that criteria and award the contract to the responsive proposer with the highest score. So different than your design bid build, where we're required to award to the lowest responsive bidder, the lease-leaseback allows you to consider multiple qualifications of the contractor, including price. And for projects that have you want very specific experience from those contractors, the lease-leaseback can be a great mechanism to ensure that you're getting contractors that have quite a bit of experience doing the type of work that you're looking for. So concerning the two different ways in which the RFP can request the funds, if you are not going to be having the contractor performing any work until after DSA approval is obtained, then you can ask as part of the RFP that they provide you with a dollar figure lump sum, and that would be the amount that would be compared between the contractors. The more common approach, given the change in the code, is the fee proposal, and that basically allows you to use the contractor prior to DSA approval. And as in awarding the RFP, you're looking at the percentage, basically the overhead percentage that they're going to be charging on the general conditions. So that is how you're evaluating the price between the contractors, is that fee percentage base. And then, as I mentioned, the governing board, once a total price has been obtained from the contractor after DSA approval, that has to come back to you for justification and your approval. So going into some of the specifics around the pros and cons with lease-leaseback, the pros: increased ability to select a highly qualified contractor who will construct the project in a timely manner. Lease-leaseback requires a competitive best value solicitation process, which allows the district to evaluate both the contractor's qualifications and price, allows the selected contractor to provide pre-construction services to the district before DSA approval, and potentially fewer change orders. I think really bringing the contractor on earlier, that seems to be one of the largest incentives that I see with districts choosing to use lease-leaseback, is to bring the contractor on early to really minimize the amount of potential change orders or issues that come up. Cons: pre-qualification is required for all lease projects. It sounds like that is not anything new for your district, so that isn't necessarily a con. It's just a requirement that you'll have to comply with. And there is an increased front-end work for the district, but it also sounds like you guys have been doing a process that looks very similar to this in the past, so I can't imagine for staff it's going to be anything, it's not going to add a huge amount of work than what they're not already used to with these types of projects. And then lease-leaseback pricing can be higher due to, there's several factors, one of them being lease-leaseback requires a new skilled and trained workforce apprenticeship requirement, which in this area isn't, I have concerns with, I'm dealing with some concerns with other districts in more isolated areas of contractors being able to meet these requirements. In this area, that's not going to be an issue, but it does potentially add a cost to the project because it is an additional requirement the contractor is going to have to comply with. And there is, potentially additional cost in the fact that pricing is not the one and only factor that you're having to award the project on, like you do with design bid build. Lease back, the contractors may not bring the price in as low, just because they understand that they may have other qualifications that is worth potentially charging a little bit more. And I know for you, given just the structure of your projects, having contractors that can mobilize certain ways, work with staff in certain ways, that you have two very large projects going on simultaneously at two different sites. For you, I think it's those are all factors that and staff will consider in evaluating these contractors to just make sure that they're the right fit and they're going to be the best for you, and those may be more important than some of the pricing factors. And I think that is it. Did I cover everything? All right. Any questions that I can answer?
Yep, we have Trustee Scott.
Okay, so around, thank you for the presentation. Around the scoring, let's just say it is a competitive bid process, and help educate me on the scoring process since these are new requirements. As you said, sometimes we're looking for experience, and if we were to do the lease-back and give it to somebody who we felt had great experience, is there an appeal, if it was competitive, is there an appeal process? Could that stall us out? Are there any pitfalls around that in terms of another contractor who didn't get the lease-back, who put in a competitive bid, and could they appeal? Where does that appeal go to? Or are we just the last word? Educate me there. I'm not sure how that works.
So the code itself doesn't specifically provide any process on that. Okay. In our template documents, we do allow for a protest period similar to what you would see in the design bid build documents, to give any contractor that due process to challenge the scoring and to potentially try and throw out, the contractor that's been identified as the highest scoring contractor. So there is a process involved in that. It's a pretty short time frame.
Okay.
But as all things, there's nothing that stops a contractor from bringing some action in Superior Court or trying to take another mechanism to stall the process. But our contract and templates embed that due process in there. We feel like that's sufficient, and the board is the final say on that. So technically, per the documents, you should be the final decision maker on that, and it shouldn't go any farther than what the process that's in those documents.
Thank you. I just wanted to understand the process. I wasn't sure if that had changed in any way. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Trustee Cooper.
And I had a question, or two questions. The first is, if you can just briefly go over the process of lease-back. I'm not sure if we all know completely, and I could probably brush up on it. And the second question is, it seems to me on the pool process at Novato High, wasn't there a benefit to using the lease-back process to the contractor would kind of work with us in terms of maybe tweaking the design and maybe giving us some value engineering? Is that part of the process or not? So those two questions.
Okay. So just for clarification on the process with lease-back, are you asking, like, what does that look like as far as? So it basically is a mechanism that allows the district to use a non-bid process, but a best value competitive process to select a contractor. And as I mentioned, it's designed where we lease the documents or lease the facility to the contractor. The contractor, we pay them in lease payments, progress payments to the contractor. And then at the end of the project, the facility gets leased back to the district for a certain period of time. So does that?
I think I understood.
Okay.
I did understand. I just want to make sure you. Yeah.
Okay.
In terms of the Novato High project, from what I know of the project, there was a value in bringing on the contractor early in the process. Also, that project was done really in the middle of campus on Novato High, and so there is value to, I'm sure the board and especially the school side appreciated the value of being able to bring on a contractor who really knew how to work with schools, how to limit the impact on learning at the site, given that project I don't believe just didn't happen completely over the summer. But there were several factors. Also, it was a complicated process, and so I know that there be bringing value to the district for working with companies who have done several pool projects, and were able to come in and help the architects from a constructability standpoint of what would be the best way, because I know they did change how that pool was, and had a lot of improvements.
All right, thank you.
And I will just quickly add concerning the value engineering, that given just the climate in construction right now, I think it's a reality that obviously prices and costs are increasing, labor and materials. And I do think one of the huge benefits, again, of bringing the contractor on is that they can value engineer and really work with the growing and changes in the market to help you, really design a project that works for your budget.
Trustee Mack.
Pre-qualification, talk me through that. How do we pre-qualify a contractor?
So you already have a pre-qualification process in place, it's my understanding, and it generally is a questionnaire. And I don't know specifically what your pre-qualification questionnaire includes, but generally it requires certain elements. One of them may be having experienced a certain number of projects on a performing arts center, or other type of specific project that you want that experience on. And then based upon the criteria that they fill out, the staff goes through those and makes a determination as to who's pre-qualified and who's not, and only those contractors that are pre-qualified are then eligible to respond to the RFP for the leaseback, or to submit a bid on another district project.
So would I be correct to say that it's our policy currently to only use pre-qualified vendors on either low bid or RFPs?
So for certain of our projects, that is, for all larger projects, there was a change in law around actually the same time that required pre-qualifications, and Lauren could tell me better than I, over $1 million, and any subcontractors over $1 million. So for those, we are required by law already to be pre-qualifying.
Like the San Ramon roof, that was a low bid, right?
That was a low bid,
But
and
they
that
were
would have had to be a pre-qualification. But
Got
the
it.
sewer projects that were about 175,000, we did not pre-qualify those construction companies.
All right, and then if I can just, would I be correct? In the banking industry, I do RFPs all the time. Yeah, they're fun. So I know there's a great deal of work, not only for the responder, but for the issuer as well. And my concern is putting together an RFP is no small feat. Are there templates, especially on the scoring side, that we can leverage from wherever? Where do we get them?
There are, and we rely a lot on our construction management group, Greystone West.
Okay.
In that case, they have done hundreds of projects, and so they can, obviously the most important thing is that we get what criteria we believe is. Obviously, pricing is going to be the largest component of any scoring system, but it's also going to be very important to say, where do we feel, if it's the Performing Arts Center, how many Performing Arts Centers do you need to have done for us to believe that, you are very qualified at performing those kind of services. So when we get into the detailed part of the scoring, we will work with them. But in terms of templates and RFPs, we rely on them and our legal to make sure that we are fulfilling all the requirements of either design, bid, build, or for leaseback. In terms of those going out to the street on those, a lot of that is similar. It's the back end work with the actual leases that take a little bit of additional work with a leaseback. So going out to the street, it's actually relatively similar in how much work we have to do. The only additional work is really putting in those, how are we determining best value as a district?
Okay.
And that would be included in anything that would come to the board.
Okay, Trustee Miller, and just to add to that, we did the pool and the dance studio at Novato High as a lease back. And Greystone West did help us last time with that. Okay, Trustee Miller.
My memory is did the pool lease back, and we did the two tracks, the stadium tracks were done lease back with pre-qualified contractors, I think. But it's a newer model for the Novato School District. Mostly we have put stuff out to bid, classic bid, build, bid, design, bid, build. So in this particular case, I'm interested in the boundary between design and lease back build. In some cases, we talked about value engineering. Clearly, that's part of a design exercise. Then you talked about pre-DSA. Clearly, you're starting to move into the realm of more architects. What does the law require, and what's our intention? Are we going to have an architect fully design the system with a set of plans that could go out to bid and then put it through the build lease back model, or are we going to have the lease back contractor retain the architect and have the architect work for them and it becomes one entity? How are we thinking of doing this?
So we will retain.
Or do we need to talk about this?
So in any lease back that we would use, we would retain our responsibility over the architects, and that contract would not move from us to the construction company. But I think one of the very large value items of going with a lease back is that ability for your construction team to be working with your architect in that early process before you've been stamped out in DSA. Because once you've been stamped out in DSA, changing is pretty significant and usually is very costly. And so having them, so any recommendation that I would give, time permitting, would be that we bring them on for those pre-construction services, because I think that's one of the largest values in doing a lease back.
So they can do value engineering, but the design is still being driven by an architect.
The design is still being driven, but the construction company can give feedback to the architect, but the architect is still responsible for bringing those plans through DSA, and they're responsible for us in terms of budget.
So to say that the architect is responsible to move the plans through DSA, is that what you just said?
That is, yes, that is correct.
I just want to be clear about that. So in many ways, we still have all the controls in place. And I don't remember how the pool was done. I know the contractor had a lot of say because they were very experienced. And it was, as everybody pointed out, a very complicated middle of the campus, very small footprint, very complex exercise. So I think that's my primary concern, is we have control. And then in terms of the value exercise, I'm thrilled to see that the laws now requires evaluation of the subcontractors, with the primary trades, primary crafts, and the general. That's a significant improvement in the law. I think we've done that anyhow here. I think the practice at Novato has been pretty conservative. I mean, clearly there was opportunity for people to hire their cousin and without a lot of accountability. And I think, we didn't do that here. The conversations here have been pretty value focused. So on that framework, so how did we've already chosen the architects for these buildings that we're going to talk about later this evening, right? We have architects. The plans are not final, but are being drawn as we speak. We're going to talk about bundling these up. So if we talk about putting a science building together with a performing arts building, is that do I got it right?
Yes.
So those are pretty different specializations. So I guess during the later conversation, I'd like to, have the conversation of maybe putting two things that are dramatically different together, like a pool and a performing arts center, would be a bad idea. You're going to convince me this evening, or you're going to try to, that it's a good idea in this case.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
the one thing I will note is of those two projects, the Performing Arts Center is really the driver on both sides. A Performing Arts Center has more trades than any other project that we do in schools. And a science building, don't get me wrong, we are building a state-of-the-art science building, but it is built primarily the same way as an English building would be, or a social studies building, with some, obviously, some very specific differences in kind of fume hoods and things like that.
Yeah,
But
acid-resistant sewers and things like that.
things like that. But you're talking the Performing Arts Center really is the driving factor, would be the driving factor around a lease back on these two, as well as the other factors. And in this presentation, if the board gives us direction, we will bring this back with all the reasons that we do believe that lease back is the right decision for these projects at the next meeting. So,
As the last question, and this is for our legal counsel, in terms of the percentage of contracts that are being let by school districts around the state of California, 20 years ago, leaseback was just hardly ever used by anybody. What are the percentage of contracts that are being let under leaseback versus design, build?
Well, I mean, I really can only speak to the 150 or so school districts that we represent, but I
That's
would.
more than I know about. I know about one, so.
But I would say that now that the changes in the code have happened, I'm going to give it probably a 60 or 70% are geared, large projects are being used under leaseback. I think for quite a long time, there was a lot of hesitancy with the use of leaseback, just given the uncertainty in how the code was written and its interpretation. And I think it was used a lot less, but now that the code has changed, I would say with large projects, the percentage is pretty high, and smaller projects, not so much. I think just because of the amount of staff time involved, it just doesn't, it isn't worth.
Two more questions, I'm sorry. Builders Exchange, are you getting pushback from Builders Exchange for this? Because now you're, the mechanism that Builders Exchange live on, which is a plan, their open marketplace they create, is changing.
I think that probably the incorporation of the trained and skilled workforce requirements and was probably potentially incorporated into the code to maybe satisfy some of the concerns around going away from the just lowest responsive bidder requirement under the leaseback. I have not seen much pushback. I don't know. I have not experienced pushback myself, and I'm not hearing about it in the marketplace with districts and across the state using this.
How about in Marin County? No? I mean,
No.
because we have, okay, and then, I think that's it. The last issue is the education requirement, the apprenticeship requirement. And we're an education institution. While we got to think about it, it's certainly right up our alley in terms of creating opportunity.
just in terms of Marin County, San Rafael, Larkspur, Corte Madera, and I believe Kentfield have all used leasebacks in the last 4 or 5 years.
Absolutely. Trustee Nell, and then Trustee Aguila.
Okay, so basically, due to all the great questions and information coming forward, I think a lot of my questions and concerns have been addressed. So essentially, the way I see it, I think there's a place for the new leaseback system. I think there is something to be said for paying a bit of a premium for value. I call it value engineering. And in a lot of cases, you just end up with a better project, and you don't necessarily pay more. And the design build system, I don't know how many times we always get change orders, and contingency is spent immediately, and so by the time it's all said and done, we paid a lot more than anyone ever bid to get a project done. So I definitely think there's a place for it. So I'm going to support it. It being an option for us to consider, and I just hope that we're we're on the pioneering edge of these new laws and regulations and templates that are being put forward, because I don't think any of them have really been put to the test yet. I don't want to be on the bleeding edge, if you know what I mean. So I heard you say 4 or 5 years, but that's not under the new laws. The new laws are relatively new. These templates by CSBA or school services, no one's been to court yet over any of this. But so a little bit towards Trustee Miller's concern, it's just, there've been 100 leasebacks done statewide using the new system, and so far it's been quiet. So we'll just have to, again, to me, we're pioneering, but we're not necessarily on the bleeding edge of a new idea and a new concept. So I support it. I think we should be open to it.
I will just note that the templates, our office has created template documents, and we've done that in consultation with the construction management firms, including Greystone West, that we work with. And we have tried to work collaboratively to the extent we can with other law firms doing the same work we are, to try and really create all-encompassing, very comprehensive documents that hopefully won't get challenged ever, because I think they are very good documents, and they have been vetted by the experts in the industry, and so hopefully they will stand up.
Yeah, essentially, I think, the intent of the law is that it helps everyone involved. There's been some abuse in the past, so they changed it somewhat. So I think it's worthy of our consideration and possibly adoption.
Trustee Aguila.
Yeah. Well, I'm just wondering if you can just explain on page 9, which is it's already there. You say that this is just a summary, and it kind of made it sound like, okay, so it's not legal advice, but can you talk about, so this is
our PowerPoint disclaimer that we put at the end of every PowerPoint, and it really is just so that we don't get in trouble by you relying on this document to, say that I was giving specific legal advice per se, that it's more of a presentation and for information purposes. So it's not anything specific to this particular presentation. It's more just our standard disclaimer that we put on the PowerPoint.
But it's you that we go to.
For legal advice. Yes.
Okay, because the next sentence says, we advise you to consult with your legal counsel. So it
Yeah.
kind of made it sound like it's not you guys.
That's a different voice.
Sorry?
Yeah, basically we're
Okay.
saying, come consult with us or talk with us if there's specific, information contained in the presentation.
Okay.
I mean, generally our PowerPoints are written pretty generically, and so it's more guidance that if you have specific issues that you need addressed.
Okay, that's fine. I wasn't clear, so. thank
No,
you.
no, yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
no, it's a good question. Okay, nobody, Trustee Miller?
2 points. One is we have many members of the Novato community are involved in the Builders Exchange in Marin County, and we certainly want to make sure that we do everything by the book, and we can talk to our neighbors, and this is a fair and equitable process. And more importantly, this process needs to lead to good value for the school district and the community of Novato. And we'll go, like we have in other bid builds, or at least leasebacks, go through a process that creates value for us. That I'm not interested in paying more than a fair market value. This board will do due diligence and make sure that we are getting a value along with supportive staff. So this is fine as long as we are conscientious about creating value for the community. I'm fine at this process.
Okay. I just have one thing. We have an administrative regulation that we adopted, a new policy.
Yes.
It's an AR that we adopted in September. I think it has a new law in there. Can you just double check?
I will double check.
And that it's
I
up to-
believe
if
you're
there's
correct, but I
any new
will.
version since then?
Yeah,
Another new version?
if there is a new version, we will absolutely
Yeah,
get the new
just-
version before
I
we
think we're good, but just
implement that. Because,
double-check that.
I believe the last fall's update was to reflect the new
yeah.
changes, but I'd have to look at it directly, so.
Okay. Take a peek
Absolutely.
at that
Thank
for
you.
me, please. All right, nothing else. The idea is for you to bring back potentially a project that will be a leaseback. This was just an educational presentation, and we could see something in the future.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Lauren, very much. Appreciate it.
Hopefully they're already in bed.
That's what we all say when we're out somewhere. Hopefully they're in bed already.
That's what the moms hope.
Yeah.
The dad.
Yancy, you're up again. You wanna?
Oh, I am.
Yeah, you are. We can switch if you wanna.
No.
Okay.
This one was just my fault. All right, so this is a quick informational item, but I do think it is important. The MSIA is the Marin Schools Insurance Authority. All 19 school districts in Marin, with the possible exception of Shoreline, who is in for sometimes, out for sometimes, and we don't need to get into that, are members of the insurance authority. We come together to get better rates and administrative costs around our insurance programs. That includes workers' compensation, property and liability, dental, and vision. And in terms, MSIA is a joint powers authority that helps us provide those kind of services and really ensure the best service and the lowest administrative cost for those services. The largest of those by far is our workers' compensation program, and that's for a couple of reasons. Workers' compensation is a large thing for any company and school district, but it also has what they call a very long tail, and so you pay if you have a employee who is injured at work, you have potentially 50 years plus of services that need to be and costs that need to be accounted for. So with that being said, as an insurance company, they have cash that needs to be invested, and MSIA as a total has $28 million of cash. Of that, $9 million is invested in LAIF, which is a statewide investment opportunity run at the state level. And the other $20 million is invested with Chandler Asset Management with some very specific requirements on what those assets can be invested in. And so I'll just read one line out of the attachment. The strategy implemented on behalf of the authority meets California government code's required objectives of safety, liquidity, and yield return, and involves investing the authority's funds in high-quality, liquid, fixed income investments to enhance both price appreciation and interest income over time. The average maturity being 1.9 year, with a vast majority of the maturities being between 1 and 3 years. So I do like to just bring this back because this is a JPA that I do sit on the board of, but it's, we don't always bring back what's going on in the insurance world here. So this is just an informational item to let you know where that money that I guess theoretically is a portion ours, but has been allocated for those insurance, to pay those insurance-related costs going into the future. So with that, I'm happy to open it up to any questions.
Trustee Nell.
Well, I just want to, thank you for bringing it forward. It's certainly a large part of our fiduciary responsibility is to keep an eye on the funds and where they are and where they go. And in the case of a joint powers authority like this, we're essentially commingling funds with other districts in an effort to pool our purchasing power. That means that we're probably one of the larger contributors, but also one of the higher benefactors from the lower premiums from that perspective. But nonetheless, these funds are commingled, and as you mentioned, you serve on a board, and though we may participate to the level of 25% of the total dollar amounts, you are one vote on this authority. And I think it's important that you bring this on an annual basis to assure us that MSIA is solvent and functioning appropriate, and to the best of your ability, you recommend we continue to participate. So I appreciate you bringing it forward.
Anybody else? Nope. All right. Thanks, Trustee Nell, for your comments. All right, we'll move on to our discussion action items. Mike Woolard will be presenting both items.
Good evening, trustees. Being as I'm one of the last items between you and adjournment, I'll make this quick. Bring before you tonight for a discussion action item, the approval to combine the Performing Arts Center project and the Center for the Sciences building project at Nevada High School into one project. And I apologize, should have clarified in the memo, this is for contracting purposes, not design purposes. So we're not building some hybrid building. It is two separate buildings, ongoing separate designs. We want to combine them contractually to go out to one bid, one contractor. That's the intent. Just wanted to clarify that. The advantages, there are many advantages to this. Of note, the biggest one is probably the expected cost savings of up to $500,000 in general conditions. And by that I mean you don't have two site trailers, two separate site supervisors, et cetera. The overhead and admin that contracts have for construction, you save that by having one of each instead of two of each at the same site. It also allows us some flexibility to work with that contractor to try to limit impacts to the school site, again, because we'll have two projects going on at two different places on the school site. So with that, it's a no-cost decision. And with that, the superintendent staff recommend board approval to combine the Performing Arts Center and Center for the Sciences building projects at Nevada High School. With that, love to answer any questions.
Trustee Miller, then Trustee Gila. And
Simple
Trustee
question, are they coming, maturing, ready to go to construction at about the same time? Are they naturally fit together? Is one
Yes.
gonna delay? Are we gonna lose this season in one or the other?
No, right now, we're still on schedule for both projects to come out of DSA about the same time and start construction still right after graduation, basically, early June.
Thanks.
Trustee Gila.
I wanted to make the motion.
Okay. So we have a first by Trustee Aguila. We do have a question.
Second.
You'll second. Okay. And then back to the question, Trustee Mack.
So we just saw this leaseback presentation, and the first question that comes to my mind is this one big RFP for a PAC and a science building on each campus?
Well, it would be two leasebacks, one for each campus.
Right, so campus by campus. So instead of having a PAC RFP and a science building RFP on each campus, I now have
One
a
RFP.
combined RFP on each campus.
Correct.
So that leads me to the next question. Does that limit us in any way in terms of the vendors out there that can handle both ends of that spectrum?
It does and it doesn't, and by that I mean, if you combine the projects at Nevada High, for example, you're looking upwards of $40 million between the two.
Right.
Pretty big chunk of money for a construction project, but it also attracts those larger companies that do
Right.
those bigger projects. Ones that might not look at a $15 million project, but $40 million might make it more attractive to them and might make it a little bit easier for them to bid, to be more competitive, because the larger companies tend to have a lot more overhead cost, which is easily to distribute over a larger project and make them more competitive. So you sort of lose some of the smaller companies that would bid on, say, a $15 million project, but I think you get a few more at the other end as well. So it's kind of an even out.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It's a bit of a trade-off between, like you said, a multidisciplined firm that can really do anything versus a specialty firm that's really good at building PACs, but maybe they don't do big projects that often.
But like Yancy said before, most big construction companies that do PACs, they are not an easy. It's probably it is the most complicated, facility.
So they're big
to build.
anyway.
And more than not, they're bigger than smaller. So ours is right in there with the kind of medium to lower end of the large range.
So maybe there's really no such thing as a company that just does PACs. Probably they're the big firms anyway. So, okay. I'm just making sure I got that answered in my head.
Trustee Miller?
The only argument against that is we have historically in this district gone out early for bids, and we've gone out with smaller projects that are suitable for construction companies that are in Nevada and Marin County area. And this model of let's put it all together to make it bigger so we get somebody who will come in and do the Performing Arts Center is opposite of that thinking. If we think the value is being able to attract larger contractors because these PACs are complex than we want to sweeten the pot so we get better bids. That's certainly a business judgment, but the judgment we've made in the past was break them into smaller pieces so they can be done over a summer, they can be done by local contractors. That may not, I mean, those contracts were more repair and maintenance of our 15 campuses. This may be a different case, and I'm happy to go ahead with this. I second it, I'll vote for it, but I do think we need to always think about how do we serve our local, how do we make the work we need done and the taxes we collected from the local community end up in local contractors' pockets and get value. So in this case, I'll support the motion, but I just think we ought to be thinking that way.
Okay, trustee Mack?
Okay, so now I'm going to go full other direction. Is there, what practical limits are there for us to put all 4 projects into one RFP across campuses? And those are geographic issue.
Well, that's first and foremost is there are some companies that big that could probably take that, but I think you then jump the bridge that gets you into a much smaller
Too small
pool.
group, okay.
And I would not recommend personally. The site thing is very important, and if you try to combine 2 different sites, I think it gets too big and too large to manage. You lose those efficiencies you gain by the geographic separation. Does that make sense?
But there's probably a chance that one vendor might end up doing
There
both.
could. That is a very real chance, but
Okay,
they'll have to
just wanted to put it out there.
apply to twice, both projects.
Thanks. Answers the question.
Trustee Nell? Open the floodgate.
Unless we get Bechtel interested with the.
Yeah, Bechtel might-
They can handle both sites. But
Turner Construction.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, I was curious by trustee Millerick's comments. I mean, I would suspect that regardless of the size of the contractor at each site, that I think there probably would be some local subcontractors that are gonna benefit from the dollars. Because, I mean, it's important that if in any possibility, that we'll be able to benefit local businesses, I mean, we wanna do that.
Sure.
To what level makes sense. I think we're just basically, that's a directive and a desire that we have, and hopefully that'll pan out.
And if the board, if we give the opportunity to bring back the lease back option for these projects at a future board, another advantage to that is you pre-qualify some of those subcontractors as well, so you have a little bit of control of that.
Well, we would look forward to that part of it then, so.
All right, so we have a motion from trustee Aguila and a second by trustee Millerick.
Okay.
Any further?
No.
No,
I'm good.
okay, all in favor? 7-0. Okay, and then the next one is regards to Samarin, the same thing.
I didn't get to say ditto, but great.
First by trustee Mack. A second by trustee Scott, all in favor? 7-0, okay. That's your easiest one.
I gotta write that down. I got one approved without saying a word.
Yes,
So
wow.
try that for next time.
So I do want to, Mike, if you may get some conversation in the local builders exchange in terms of this conversation. You need
Sure.
to, have thought through and be able to present why we chose the things we chose tonight. Because it will exclude some local contractors by making them bigger. It's going to happen in the point, so.
Okay, before I adjourn, just an announcement for the board. If you could put this on your calendar, there's a groundbreaking for the San Marin Light Stadium. We've scheduled it, it's 3 p.m. on the September 10th. Yeah, and I know it's a tight turnaround, but we need to get them going, and it had to work for certain people's schedules, so this worked. Okay. We'll FaceTime. So 3 p.m., or excuse me, 3 p.m. September 10th at San Marin, okay? And then our next regular board meeting is on the 18th of September, and then we do have the bond workshop that we scheduled for the 25th of September, okay? Meeting adjourned.